right, let's, if we can, call the meeting to order for the Harwich Conservation Commission for January 5th, 2022. Just as a preface to this meeting, the public, we are going back to hybrid meetings.
We've always been hybrid.
We've always been hybrid. We're going full hybrid in that our commissioners are now hybrid as well. So those of you that do want to log on to the meeting can access the log-on information on the Town of Harwich website for the Conservation Commission. I will say that if you want to dial in, the phone number is 1-571-317-3122, and the access code 469-616-493.
Ernie, you may just want to mention the commissioners who are present remotely.
The commissioners that are remote, we have John Ketchum, remote, and Stan Pasterzak. Did I pronounce that right, Stan? Okay. And Mark Coleman is also remote. All right, thank you very much. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight. First one is a request for determination of applicability for James O'Neill at 5 Sunset Road for the construction of a covered porch on an existing dwelling.
They're present remotely.
Do we have a proponent like to address this?
James and Maura, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Would you like to describe your project, please?
Could you say that one more time?
Would you like to describe your project, please?
Oh, describe the project.
Oh, it's, we're putting on a covered porch, open-ended. It comes off the front of the house and not a full farmer's porch, but just half of it
On sonotubes.
on sonotubes.
All righty. Amy, do you have comments on this?
Sure. So the only wetland resource area for this project is flood zone, which is also known as land subject to coastal storm flowage. As the porch will be on sonotubes in the event of a major coastal flood event, it will not have any greater adverse impact to the flood zone or abutting properties than if you didn't have a porch, because the water would be able to go under, and we had a major catastrophic event. So I would recommend approval with a -2 determination.
Please.
Excuse me, Amy, this is Stan. It's very tough to understand what's being said at this end.
Okay, we'll take a look at that, Stan. I'll move my mic closer too. Is that a little better?
That's a lot
Yeah.
better.
Okay. Let me know if I'm too
Thank
loud,
you.
because I'm right on top of the mic. So I am
No,
recommending
that's
approval
great.
with a -2 determination. However, I do think it's important to note that the extent of the work on the house is more than just the porch. The porch is really our jurisdiction, but you are proposing to put on a new roof, new siding, change out your windows, and do interior renovations. So because your house is in a flood zone, when the work is in a floodplain and the value of the work to be done is equal to or greater than 50% of the appraised value of the structure, the whole structure would need to be brought up to flood compliance. We don't have an appraisal for this property, so for now, I just based it on the assessed value of the building. And your assessed value of the structure is $162,000. Your request for your permit in the building department was $100,000, so it would trigger the 50% rule. This is not something that conservation is gonna get involved in too much, so long as you don't have to make any alterations that would impact the ground or things like that. But it is something for you to be aware of.
We had the house raised, so that
I can't
what
hear
you have is,
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
You're yelling.
we had the house raised, and so that we sent all that information in. It's appraised more than the 160,000,
Yeah.
but that's okay. So we're aware of that 50%.
Just, again, I like to try to make people aware of these things before they get too far along in the process. So usually appraisals are way above assessed value, so I'm not surprised by that. But I'm glad to know that you're aware of it. So I would recommend approval with a -2 determination for the porch.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Let's take comments from the commissioners. Jim, do you want to start?
No further comment. I agree with Amy's recommendation.
Al?
No comment.
No comments. Stan?
Got to remember how to do this. No comment.
Okay, John?
Yes, no comment. I agree with Amy's recommendation.
Wonderful, good. And then our newest member?
No comment.
Okay, and I have no comments either, so. Mark, I'm sorry, Mark, did you have any comments on this?
No remarks, thank you.
All right, thank you. I can't see your picture on the screen, so I tend to overlook MJC up there. My apologies.
No worries. I, for some reason, my camera doesn't seem to be functioning tonight, but we'll figure it
Okay,
out.
no problem. I'll just ask MJC to respond. With that, can we have a motion on this?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the request for determination of applicability for 5 Sunset Road, map 12, parcel T4-8 with a -2 determination.
Thank you. Can we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the,
All up here,
any opposed? I stand, Mark and John, I assume you all voted in the affirmative?
right, I think just saying, do we have to do a roll call if we're on camera?
It would be
Remote.
helpful for you to call on those members
All right.
when we do the vote.
Stan, your vote?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for 602 Queen Anne Road, map 83, parcel S2. This is a proposed trash removal, replanting, walkway, planting beds, and a patio.
Might have a stand behind the, maybe. Sometimes there's one lurking behind there. Or a chair, those chairs look great. You all have the plans.
That works.
We're good, we got it anyways in our packets.
Move it around.
Thank you for having us. My name is Bob Perry, company name is Cape Cod Engineering, and Phil Cheney, landscape designer, is working with us on the project, and David Nordlander and Mi Ting Ling, the applicants, are, I think, on the Zoom call.
We are.
They're not in the room. Just to introduce the project to you, this residential redevelopment project was before this commission in 2016. And at that time, the site was in pretty bad shape. Some of you might be familiar with that place where there were a lot of outbuildings. There was a tremendous amount of trash on the property that had been just deposited over the decades. And I think the arrangement that was made, that the applicant at that time would proceed with the redevelopment and clean the place up. Well, not all of that cleanup occurred. And the new owner, Mr. Nordlander and Ms. Lee, bought the property, and they assumed the responsibility of the order of conditions and the certificate of compliance process. So we're before you to continue with and to complete the cleanup. I can explain what that involves. And Mr. Cheney's plan is into this notice of intent, wrapped in, because the work that's being proposed, very central to the home site, is certainly not going to have the same level of alteration that the cleanup would have. And it seemed like a very good idea to put the landscape completion in the same notice of intent of cleanup. What we have is a isolated pocket of trash that's still in the wetland, and we still have debris that you can see on the ground surface in the inner buffer zone. And the two areas are hatched on the plan. The only practical way to do it is to come in with a machine, no different than how the work was done initially, where there was a lot of earthwork done with the project, and to, both by hand and by machine, extract the junk that you can find. I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, but the idea is to go at that area behind the house and visually creep along, visually take out everything that can be harvested. In the wetland, that's more isolated, and there are trash pieces out into the wetland that can be retrieved by hand, and there is a very consolidated area that would probably use a bucket reaching in from the buffer zone. Some damage to the vegetation will occur, and so this plan proposes to simply place native shrubs back into the wetland in the location where they might be altered. And depending upon the level of damage, might dictate, probably with some review by your staff, of how many natives actually go back in. Because it's mostly native in there today. It's a very long-term overgrown cranberry bog, I think, that was sequestered from the pond 100 years ago. The activity in the buffer zone is definitely more excavation, and that's going to require a full restoration in that area with the shrub groupings that you see there and native grasses. So Phil has looked at that, although it appears on the cleanup plan, but Phil has addressed landscape features near the house, but he's also taken a look at the vegetative improvements that would be going back to 2016. We still have mitigation plantings that can be added to this site. As the cleanup ends, the site would be restored in that fashion. Access is going to be straight in from the street on probably the left side of the house, because the septic system's on the right side of the house. There are very poor condition pine trees that are looming over the house and leaning. One is to be saved, 3, I think, are to be removed. There's no reason to take the stumps. There are vegetation that we classify as dead scrub black cherry that are, I think, going to be removed. Just 2 or 3 of those stalks you can see. And to bring this into focus, there's a single tree out into the wetland that Mr. Nordlander has, I think he spoke to somebody about the fact that it's completely drenched in lichens. It's weak, it doesn't seem to be doing very well, and he's asked me to include it in the application that this tree out here be removed, just cut flush and taken out. So that's really the summary of this. It's probably a 2-day, 3-day job, depending on how hard they hit it. So that's the summary, and Phil, I think, can go into his landscape plan to describe that to you, and then we'll take your questions.
Yes.
Thanks.
I'll do that, and then we can handle all the questions there. Yes, the Nordlanders are looking to add some hardscape to the landscaping, create some more livable space. We'd like to add a set of wood steps off the east end of the existing deck down to a new patio, which will be dry laid and include a spa built into the patio, a fire pit, and a retaining wall to make that all hold together on the side of the slope. Everything, again, is outside of the 60-foot buffer to the inland bank. And I'm showing it foundation plantings and then plantings throughout the property to complete the landscape, which has never really been fully completed. We do have resource areas on 3 sides of the property. We've got the Eldridge Pond on the north. We have a ditch, a wet ditch on the west that we have a buffer zone from, as well as a vegetated wetland opposite or across the street, across Queen Anne Road. So I'm spreading mitigation plantings throughout the buffer zones in there. Got a number of trees there. The calculations I show on my plan that we are adding hardscape for that patio and as well as the front walk from the driveway to the front door. Our total increase in hardscape, we're looking at 640 square feet, and we're providing over 2,200 square feet of mitigation plantings. Now, also, some of that excess is, I'm showing plantings of mitigation that were called for in Cape Cod Engineering's plan of September 13th, 2016, dating myself. So we're trying to plant those to satisfy the conditions from that original order, as well as add additional mitigation plantings to cover the new hardscape we're proposing. I think that probably covers what I'm looking for. We'll take questions.
I did have one thing to add, and Amy and I discussed the old project versus the current project that's before you. Phil touched on the areas, but without putting everybody to sleep with numbers, the hardscape that's on Phil's plan is slightly less than it will result in slightly less altered area, permanently altered area than was approved in 2016. When the house was finally built, it was quite a bit smaller, to the tune of 600 and some odd square feet than the original house that was approved. And the driveway also got smaller as well. So we had a good balance to come back with, and the mitigation, as Phil said, is a good dose of mitigation. So that's the way the Rivers Act stacks up as far as the accounting goes, and it is the Coys Brook ditch that we're still, standing by the possibility that that's a riverfront area and treating it as such.
Okay, thank you. Amy, comments?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
What type of machine, Bob, are you planning on using to go in there?
Wayne, can you hold those? I want to hear Amy's
I'm
comments
sorry.
first, and then we'll go through the commissioners and get some comments from you all.
No problem. So, when I was looking at the project, I got a little hung up on the numbers myself, and then what made it very simple is when you look back at what was originally approved, even though it's greater than what Rivers would typically allow, that was allowed because the site had previously been in such disarray and had numerous structures on it, very close to the wetlands as well as the river itself. So the commission approved more than they typically would for a typical riverfront application. But because they approved more and did less, I think it does work out, as Mr. Perry said, in their favor. It's almost, there's a little bit, even with the new patio and wall and staircase, there's still less, about 15 square feet less, square feet of hardscape in the riverfront area than what was approved back in 2016, and the regulations for riverfront have not changed since then. So, in general, I think the project is a huge improvement from what was previously there pre-2016, with the house pretty much on the ditch, and some trash has already been removed, which is wonderful, but this is to fix the remainder of that. I will let Wayne ask his question, but it's the same as mine in a moment. I'll just speak real quickly to the plantings. I think the plantings out front of the house by the roadway, I think they're great. They meet our mitigation stipulations and their native plantings. The foundation plantings, we don't require that they all have to be native, so you have some ornamentals in there. And I actually did speak with the Norlanders on the site and made them aware that the property would be subject to the no chemical fertilizer, including organic stipulation. So they're aware of that. Water is, I think there is irrigation, or we could allow potentially irrigation. on the property if there's not. That's tends to not be the issue, it's the phosphorus and the nitrogen inputs. And then I agree with you that the plants that are gonna go into the area that's disturbed, in the buffer and in the wetland a lot, especially in the wetland, we're gonna have to we'll do an on-site visit, and then after you finish the removal of your trash debris, I'd like to come out again, and that way we can see where things are gonna get, where and how much and what is gonna get planted in those areas, because it's not gonna be until you finish that you're really gonna know. But my other question is your patio is dry laid?
Correct.
So, some amount of perviousness?
Yes, yep, the idea
Yep.
would be set on a
Sand
dense
base?
graded gravel base with
Okay.
the sand setting bed, and,
Okay.
but yeah, the plan does state dry laid pavers, yep.
Just clarifying it for everybody. Nope, I have the same question as Wayne, but, per what you've presented, as long as we can iron out the details, I would recommend approval of your project.
Great,
Yeah,
thank
Bob,
you.
I was just wondering what type of machine you plan on using. I'm hoping it's something with a thumb on it that you can reach down and just pick up individual pieces with, a small excavator or some sort.
I've been, the owner has been seeking cost estimates. What I envision, based on just general experience, is that it would be a mid to small-sized excavator with a thumb, because they're so standard. And there'd probably be a skid steer or some small loader, but not a full-size loader, that's gonna run that stuff to the truck. And if you've been there, you know, you could run around that place today and you wouldn't hurt a twig, because it really needs to be, it needs to be planted up. So, we're not looking to overdo anything, but it'll be an efficient operation.
We definitely want the contractor to be at the pre-construction meeting,
Yeah,
so I can.
I see people on the ground looking at the same time the machine is operating. So there's a spotter pulling this stuff out,
Yep.
getting eyes on it. And then it's just a matter of proceeding from east to west, I think.
Okay, Wayne, any other questions?
No, answer my question.
Okay, Alan?
I have nothing. I think you've got a good plan. I think it looks good, and wish you luck.
Okay, great. Jim?
Yeah, I have one question for the applicant and one question of clarification. I think I'd like to address to Amy. Let me do the clarification first. Amy, the additional hardscape that's being added according to this plan, is that pre-approved under the 1916 approval or the 2016 approval, or is that part of what we're approving tonight?
That's part of what you're approving tonight. What was
Okay.
part of the 2016 approval was the house itself actually extended farther to the west,
Okay,
and the driveway was a little different. So picture about another 500 square feet added on to the side of the house that's closer to the wetland, and a little bit more in the driveway. So they didn't, when the previous owners built the house, they built it smaller. So what they're asking for approval tonight, in addition to the plantings and stuff, is the patio, which was not approved prior.
okay, thank you for that clarification. Now, my one question for the applicant, assuming you receive the approval tonight, when do you propose that you'll be doing the work, especially the removal of the trash?
Great question. The goal is to get all of that done prior to the onset of the earliest part of the growing season. So they don't miss any good spring weather to get things in place. And that's the applicant's goal. Everybody's busy, but he's been looking for eligible contractors and told me just the other day that he's found a group, it's really a landscape company, willing to come in and do this. It's actually smaller gear, and the goal is to get going so that the planting can go forward in mid-March.
Okay. Assuming we approve tonight, I hope you meet that goal.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Stan, any comments, questions?
Looks like a good project that should certainly improve that property. Just want to clarify, those 3 trees you're removing, are those the 3 pitch pines there?
They are.
Yeah, those were the ones we were
Okay.
talking about on site today.
Yeah, I know we were talking, but I wasn't sure if we were talking about 1 or 2 or what, so I just want to clarify that. And I guess the only other question I have is, what if by chance, as you're clearing that property, you come across some hazardous material or anything?
Great question. There hasn't been any sign of it so far. What's been on the surface has not, in my experience, and I was all over the site in 2016 and of late, I haven't found any containers. I think if it's observed or if it's encountered, it has to be reported. And if if it's greater than a certain volume, it crosses a threshold for a response action, but it's not likely given what we know. But I think
Right.
it's good to have an understanding that the people working there are gonna have to keep their eyes open.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Mark, any comments?
Nope, just, I think it'll be a great thing to have this cleaned up. And as long as they exercise a little care, I don't see any problem.
Great, thank you. John?
Yeah, thanks. One question, I don't see any mention of the lawn on these plans. And the lawn is pretty scrubby looking at the moment. I'm just wondering whether there are any plans, what are your plans for the lawn?
Yes, on the landscape plan, I do note fescue lawn. So that would be basically overseeding as necessary with a mixture of native fescues.
I see, okay, thank you. I just have one question that I don't think it makes any difference, but you're showing distances from the inland bank, but this is a question for Amy as much as anything. Isn't the controlling distance from the edge of BVW as opposed to the inland bank?
They're coincident. They're approximately. the
They
same.
are pretty much, but I'm
Okay.
just looking to
That's a good
clarify
question.
that point. This always gets me.
If they're pretty much one and the same because of topography, then I think it's okay. You know, if they're 5-10 feet off, then I think they should be separated out.
Well, they're labeled separately on the plan, but the distance, anyway, it's a net. I just wanted to clarify that. The controlling thing is the BVW, is that correct? Not the top of bank.
It's actually the most landward resource area is the controlling factor, which is mostly same here.
I'll add that
Okay.
the Coysbrook ditch is no question, an inland bank.
Right.
And the landwardmost portion of that has been delineated and is flagged and is on the plan. The BVW line to the north, although it's not a water body per se, you could identify that as an inland bank, but it's coincident with the BVW. In fact, I'm not quite sure that we actually have a continuous inland bank at that BVW.
Probably
We
it's
do
the
have a drop in
BVW.
grade, but it is not a water body. So we think the delineation is certainly adequate for purposes of this review. But we do have two items, no question.
Okay, thank you.
That it, John? Couple of questions.
That's it.
Thank you, thanks. Couple of questions I had, and it's difficult to look at the mitigation here and the structure and try to overlay that on the approval that we gave in 2016,
Right,
as far as a change in area for,
yeah, from the
Coverage.
2016 plan, yeah.
yeah, so I assume you've gone over that, and you're comfortable that the $500 square foot reduction offset by the addition of the patio is,
I looked at the distances from that stream to the house for both plans too, and I saw the reduction there.
okay,
So
all right,
yes, I'm
good,
comfortable with that.
thank you.
Actually, more shrubs going in because of the disturbance for the cleanup than the first mitigation plan. So it's.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great, good, thank you. How deep do you plan to go for the,
Well, it was superficial, but the previous construction, or the construction that was related to the home, may have caused for some level of burying.
Okay.
The idea here is that no one's going to excavate the property looking for trash. It's got to be a visual inspection with removal. And when I was there in 2016, I have to say, it would have taken a lot of work for somebody to bury trash there, and it did not look like anyone was doing any work there. So
Okay.
most of the trash was on the surface, and there were some depressed areas of old foundations, maybe 2 or 3 feet,
Yeah,
had some junk in them. We don't expect to see much, and I've done digging in there, especially in the wetland, looking for buried trash, because I needed to explain whether or not we were going to alter the wetland to get it.
right.
And I didn't find any subterranean objects in a lot of probing. So
Okay.
I think we're shallow.
Okay, so you don't anticipate enough coming out that you'll have to bring fill in necessarily?
I think there could be some topsoil or subsoil that would be advantageous to have for the planting. But
Okay.
I don't think a lot, no.
All right, good. Then I also noticed on the back, in addition to the 3 pitch pines that you earmarked for removal, there were a lot of trees along the back boundary, some of which were about like that or so.
At the boundary of the wetland, or,
I'm sorry, along where you're doing your mitigation.
right,
That, should I assume that you're taking those out as well?
only if they're dead or in some way distressed. I didn't see any reason to take out any healthy specimens, and there's so few there that they'd probably be easy to work around.
Okay.
But I do know that there were some very distressed and almost dead, if not dead, say 4 or 5 inch scrubs, say a black cherry or an oak, that
Yeah,
looked pretty bad along that edge.
I saw those as well.
Yeah.
There were some healthy ones in there too.
If you go off to the west side, there's a lot more healthy vegetation there. Why, I don't know. It may be more shaded or less affected by the previous project. And I think all of that's just going to remain as it is.
Okay,
There are some invasives over there, so we would definitely be interested if they were to remove manually to the best extent they can, the invasives towards the western side near the ditch that are climbing, their vines
Sweet
climbing.
mostly?
Bittersweet, and I think there's some honeysuckle in there.
Yeah, right, there was.
Climbing.
If
But-
that is your desire, there's no objection to pulling. I mean, bush honeysuckle, you can just pull out, and they
Right,
could
I
go
mean,
with
when you have
that.
the machine there potentially, it just makes your life easier down the road for management.
Right.
So I know, and the Norlanders are on the call, so, I mean, speaking with them, I know that they want to do what's right for the property, so.
yeah. I guess my concern is that I did notice a number of trees on the back boundary that I assume were healthy, but yet you haven't marked them as being removed, yet you also earmarked other trees back there that you're going to take out. So I would ask that you work with Amy, anything over a reasonable size not be removed if it's in good condition.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, the object here is not necessarily to create a vista landscape of the pond necessarily, as to preserve the natural environment that's back there.
That's right.
The last question I have for you is the stairs that are off the existing deck that go right out to the 50. And we've created this 10-foot buffer between the 50 and the 60 as to preserve the 50 as a no disturb zone. Having those steps end up right on the boundary of the 50, you're pushing people right into the 50.
Right.
And I don't think I'm comfortable with that.
Just to clarify, those are existing steps that are part of the original construction?
They are.
Yes,
Yep.
yep, those are not proposed.
Oh,
The
really?
steps I'm proposing are on the far east corner up against the building.
Show me where those would be.
By the patio.
Near the,
They're
near
going
the,
down to the
near the hut.
patio.
Going down to the patio then?
yes.
Oh, I see. All right.
Those other stairs that you're referring to, when they were permitted back in 2015-ish,
Yeah.
we didn't have that
50, we didn't have the 50 to 60.
right, 50
Yeah.
to 60, and also, like I said before, a lot of the structures were in the 50 previously,
Yeah.
so they let them
All right.
have that set of stairs there.
Yeah, that's, because I mean, there's opportunity to move those stairs like off of the patio, or off of the west side of the property, of the deck or something like that, which would have been much better than where they are right now. If you're doing that work on the patio and you saw fit to move them over there, I think it would be advantageous for the landscaping, for preserving that 50%, 50-foot buffer zone and all.
Sure. I think perhaps we can leave that up to the owners. At this point here, I'd like the approval with the existing stairs to remain.
Yeah, and we have to, because obviously, because they are there, so. All right, thank you. Those are the only comments that I had. Are there any other comments or comments from the audience? Anybody have any questions? All right, with that, can we have a motion?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the notice of intent for 602 Queen Anne Road, map, I have to get my glasses off, map.
83?
83 parcel S2.
And can we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Roll call on the, on offsite. Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And I'm in favor, so it's unanimous. Motion passed.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Good night. Here to you.
I'll take them. You can also independently scan them to us.
Next item on the agenda is notice of intent for 23 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U4-32 for proposed access steps, elevated walkway, and a vista management.
Is this one on? You can hear me okay?
That's fine, Mark, yeah.
Hi. Okay, for the record, I'm Mark Burgess of Shorefront Consulting, representing for the applicant, Mr. Ellis.
Mark, you have an awful thick mask on tonight.
I have two.
It's a little hard to.
Take one off.
Oh,
Does
you
that
got more
help?
than one, okay.
So I do have a cold. It's been diagnosed as a cold. I've been tested and all that. So if
Okay, I just want to
cough-
make sure everybody hears your comments.
Yeah, I understand. If I cough, it's not because of anything else other than just a normal cold. But I'm going to stand back here because we have other people in the front. So Mark actually is going to speak first. Right?
Okay, Chair Mark Ellis, owner. My wife, actually, Deborah Ellis, is on screen. Thank you for all coming and looking at the property again today. I explained then, but I'll state it briefly for the record now. I certainly listened and took on board some of the things and concerns you had previously, and really did want to make sure that there wasn't, or we weren't doing anything that might damage the marsh. In fact, that we should, it's our responsibility to look after that marsh. It's our property. And so really, in talking to the people that we were working with, wanted to find somebody who was a true marsh expert so that they could advise me as to whether we were doing the right things, and somewhat irrelevant to the walkway. And Seth Wilkinson managed to introduce us to Dr. Burdick. He came, looked at our property, and has given us a wealth of advice on what is and is not appropriate, and whether it will or will not damage the marsh. So I'm very grateful to him. I think he can bring tonight the sort of information that you were looking for, and so we're here to present that information along with other information that you requested at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll just go through. There was a letter that was submitted with several items in it, and I'm just going to briefly go through those items just to restate them for the record, and then the experts can speak. So the letter, on my part, we revised the plan to add or change the decking to grading over the entire structure. That is it for the revisions for the plan, and you, of course, have that. So then we went on to address 4 basic concerns that the commission had from the last hearing. The first one was concerns about impacts to the salt marsh, both from the project itself and from construction. So Dr. David Burdick is here to speak about his report that he submitted for that. Another item was we were asked to look into what the differences were between this project and a previous project that seems similar, but when I looked at it, there is at least 9 points in this letter that these projects are completely different. So I was actually surprised to find as many differences as there were, but it's quite different. Third item was the construction protocol and the alternatives analysis. These were almost rewritten. I tried to give you a copy that had italicized items in it so you knew what was changed, and then there were other sections that were completely deleted. So I also gave you a clean copy in case you just wanted to read the whole thing from the beginning. The fourth item was impacts from construction, and Chris Norgio is here from Anchor Marine. He'll be the one installing the walkway. He's done this type of walkway many times in other towns. So he's going to explain to you how he would do it on this site to minimize any construction impacts. He was the one who installed that 320-foot catwalk in Chatham, and I'll get to that later because we visited it. We were asked to look more into the 70-foot option of the single span structure. And frankly, the more we looked into it, the less practical it became, so we've just simply removed that option from the project. In the submission, there's a letter from Reuben and Rudman, their letter of support from Glenn Wood and Michelle. And then later on, we included pictures. So Amy and I and Melissa went out to that catwalk in Chatham and took a real close look at it. Took separate pictures, which you have in your file, and I'll let Amy speak. I'll let Amy speak to that. But we went out there, and bear in mind that walkway was completed in July, or at least the portion of the pile driving was completed in. Oh no, you were out of there by July. Right, he was out of there by July 4th. So it had only the remainder of the summer season to grow back. Of what little damage there was. So that's I think the timing is important to look at the pictures. And then I submitted 2 reports that some of the board members have seen, but they're there for the record in case you wanted to read them. And Wilkinson Ecological Design submitted a revised plan with a land management plan also to supplement any of the protocols that are going to be in place for the project. And Katrine is here, and Seth is online. Glenn Wood is online. So the team is here to answer questions you might have, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Burdick.
If I might say just one thing, I asked Glenn to join us because I just wanted to make sure that we were following the bylaws in the correct way, and obviously I have no knowledge of that, and so that's why he's here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Greetings, Conservation Commission, Chair and Conservation Commission of Harwich. Happy to be here. I'm an associate research professor at the University of New Hampshire in the Department of Natural Resources, and I hold the position of director of the Jackson Estuarine Lab. So most of my working career has been working in estuaries, working on salt marshes and seagrasses and other habitats. And I really my research has a habitat ecology focus, looking at human impacts and how to reduce those, and also how to restore these ecosystems. I came here today to support the Ellis's Walkway as designed by Shorefront Consulting. You can see there's just a 3-foot walkway. It's very narrow, supported by single pilings that are quite high above the marsh surface. And from what I read of the Harwich Protection Regulation and the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, it looks like everything's in compliance. I studied them diligently to make sure I was going to be able to support this project. This structure will ultimately protect the marsh because the foot traffic of this is sort of a very wet marsh, It's not a very, it's not what I would call a very healthy marsh. It's very wet marshes. It's oversaturated with water. And those marshes are the worst to walk on. They just don't handle human traffic. And so allowing people to walk back and forth across the marsh to access this section of beach will really damage it over the long run. So this structure will prevent that from happening and provide enough light down into the marsh. And the light's really important for the marsh, for a healthy marsh, because those marsh plants have to survive salinity stress, something that we are unable to do, and most plants and animals cannot survive. And they also survive anoxia, life without oxygen below the roots. So they need a lot of sunlight to generate the biochemical machinery to be able to survive that site. I'm especially thrilled with the construction team that Chris Norgio brings to the table, because that will really minimize the impacts of the marsh. Any sort of compression from large machinery out there will not take place under his watch, under his methodology. So that's pretty exciting. So we're not even going to get temporary marsh impacts. A lot of the other sites that you might look at that might be similar to this, or maybe a little wider walkway, you might see recovery after 2 years, good recovery with this unipile system, 1.5 times up, 1.5 times the height above the width of the dock. So I think that's going to work out pretty well. I'm also confident that overall the project will improve the health of the marsh because we have shade removal along the shoreline edge where coppice trees had been sort of trained to grow out over the marsh and shade the marsh. And when the marsh gets shaded, it does need the light. There's no vegetation under there. It's all died. So when the vegetation dies, the roots are not putting the energy below ground. And so 5-10 years of no new energy below ground, and the ground collapses because the marsh sediment is made of peat, and a good portion of that is roots, and live roots and dead roots. But with no live roots for a decade, it just gets collapsed and gets compressed down, and so we start losing elevation. And so that's not really what we want in our salt marshes. We want our marshes to build with sea level rise. So we want a healthy marsh that will build with sea level rise. So we want the marshes to be flooded. We want the marshes to be flooded with sediment. They capture sediment. They help build. We also need the light there. So Wilkinson Design is going to remove the trees that have been trained out to shade the marsh, and they're going to replant that section and another little section by the water. And I'll let Katrine explain that. Also, I suggested to the Alice's and to Wilkins Ecological Design to groom the marsh, because there's also a section where rack gets caught, and the rack shades the marsh as well and kills the plants under the rack. So it's the accumulated dead material. Some years it's not bad at all and can be left there, but other years it can be thick and really should be removed off the surface of the marsh. And that will help reduce shoreline erosion at the site. I mentioned a lot of the marsh is oversaturated, so if you look at my letter, you'll see a picture with some wavy polygons showing the darker color of the saturated marsh. It's really oversaturated, and that's because the original ditches, the farmers' ditches that went out to the creek were actually a little longer because of erosion and what the Corps has done in terms of dredging. And so that's been blocked off a couple places. And so that's holding the water back, and it's oversaturating the marsh. And so working with the mosquito control, Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project, that could, the team could work with them to maybe increase the drainage. They have permits, I guess, in place, maintenance permits for some of these ditches, so that might be useful. And they're getting more interested in doing a shallow treatment rather than the typical ditching that's been done in marshes for years. And so the shallow approach is probably better for salt marshes, and I've been working on that for the last probably almost a decade now, trying to get people to think about shallow ditches. Because marshes don't really need to drain 2 feet, because when you drain it that much and the water all leaves, it's a little unnatural. And most of the natural creeks and such are more gently sloped. So when you have a vertical ditch that's drained, it takes the water out of the marsh, which is good, but then it's too good. It overdrains the marsh and it oxidizes the peat. And so again, we get reduced carbon dioxide going in the atmosphere. So that's one of the things that could improve the health of this marsh. So all in all, I think the project has been designed to allow passage of the landowner to their beach without really any negative consequences for the productivity of the marsh grass, and actually improve the health of the marsh and the productivity of the marsh in the long run, because they're going to be planting marsh, getting rid of shade, and hopefully reducing the oversaturation of the marsh. I visited a similar structure on Chase Road, 10 Chase Road, the Thrall residence, and I didn't see any direct or indirect impacts, and I guess it was just over a year after that was installed to the marsh, in the low marsh or the high marsh. So I think that the fact that we had these unipile systems, I think is working pretty well in this. And also the through flow grading as well works pretty well. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the marsh in general, specific to this application.
Great, good, thank you, Doctor. Mark, any further comments?
I don't have any comments. Do you want to see if there's any questions for Dr. Burdick before we move on to Chris?
Why don't you do your presentation, and
I'll leave you to Chris Norgio then.
Good evening. Amy, how are you?
Long time no see. I'm good. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. So, construction method. I've been doing this for 39 years. Yes, I'm getting tired of it. But I've worked in almost every town in the Cape and off Cape. Some of the projects are easy and some are challenging, like a muddy marsh or going over a marsh. I do a lot of long piers across the marsh, like in Duxbury. They'll be 500 feet long. That's where I learned the technique to keep the marsh clean and not make tracks as we go. So that education taught me that if you use environmental mats and planks, the environmental mats we would make a road out of, and the planks we usually walk beside our road so we can move them just for our foot traffic. I find that foot traffic on the job site does the worst damage rather than machinery. So Mark showed you some pictures of a project I did in Chatham with a machine, a pile driver, that I can easily walk across the marsh and not sink in using the environmental mats and planks. It is very lightweight. It's on an aluminum trailer, so that is light. It's wood framed and aluminum framed. The heaviest thing on it is a 500-pound hammer. So we will, in this particular project, we will probably come from land rather than from sea, because they're going to take some trees out. And I will build a road next to the pier, and then reach over and drive one piling, and then move the next one. There's only like 6 pilings on this pier. I'm probably going to be on the marsh with the machine 2 days. It's not motorized, so we push it by hand. It's not motorized to travel, so either we push it by hand or we set an anchor and use a come along, move it along. I find that if you work in the summer months on the marsh, it does show damage. Once you step on it and break the fibers, it'll leave the footprint. So we preferred to do this off season, like November to June, when things are the quietest in the marsh. When I did a project town of Orleans, they say, after November 1st, you may go over the marsh. So that's, we found works best. Is there anything else, Mark?
Once you get the pile driver out, how do you protect the marsh from your own foot traffic
Oh.
that you're building?
Thank you. So, once we're done driving the pilings, we take the apparatus off the marsh and we take the road away. The only thing we leave is the walkway we walk on. And that's only a 12-inch plank. So if it's 60 feet across that marsh, or 70 feet, there'll be 70 feet of plank. And we just, we use that to keep us, when we travel back and forth, to keep us from creating that muddy path. Most everything is carried by hand out there. If it's heavy or longer lumber, we put it on a wheelbarrow, and we run it down that same path. I think that's about it.
Okay. Good.
Okay, I think next up is Katrine to talk about the revisions that were made to the Wilkinson plan.
Great, thank you. So for the record, Katrine Smith, Design. Can you hear me okay?
We can, I don't, you may want to move that.
Thanks. Okay, at the last hearing, we heard your thoughts on our mitigation plan, and they were quite favorable. So I don't believe you asked for any changes or clarifications, but we made refinements to our plan nonetheless, and that was really based on feedback from Dr. Burdick. So you'll see we submitted a revised land management plan and restoration plan, and really based on his recommendations, we added some more details. So first, you'll see on our restoration plan, the seed mix. We kind of made it more specific, upper parts of the bank, and then closer down to the salt marsh, the seed mix that we would use. Adding species such as switchgrass that will really thrive, especially right there along the toe of the bank. And we also made, based on his recommendations in our land management plan, we added an annual rack maintenance protocol. So every May, after the winter months, we would go in and remove any debris, any rack that had accumulated over the winter, just along the toe of the bank. There's quite a lot of plastics and stuff in there right now, so we'd like to get that out every year to prevent the salt marsh vegetation from getting smothered. And then, like he mentioned, the mosquito control, we didn't add any details of that in our plans, but we're happy to coordinate that and that effort with mosquito control and the applicant in order to just make sure that this is a very resilient salt marsh moving forward. So overall, our work, as I described in the last hearing, spans over 3,000 square feet. We really focused on the invasive plant removal and planting of native grasses, shrubs, and tree, even the pitch pine that we've specified on the plan. And we're certain that this will improve bank stability, enhance the habitat available for wildlife, and improve the stormwater function of this property and for Saquatucket Harbor. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mark, is that, anyone else?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you for bringing all these experts to your presentation. I think that was very helpful. Amy?
I'll try to keep it fairly brief. The proposed walkway is 88 feet long, 3 feet wide, and at an elevation of 4.5 feet above marsh, measured from the decking. My one change that I would recommend is what Division of Marine Fisheries had recommended, and we have, even though our recommendation and our regulations is a 1-to-1 height to width ratio, when DMF has recommended the 1.5-to-1, which is what we're proposing going forward come May town meeting, the commission has always agreed with DMF and conditioned that the height to width ratio should be 1.5-to-1 from the underlying structural member. This would make the structure 9 inches higher than proposed, which would result, I think, in having the ramp go out 2 or 3 feet farther onto the beach. I think because the ramp is going out onto beach area where there is no vegetation, I see that the only thing there is a benefit, is to getting up a little bit higher the marsh and remaining consistent with what we've required for other projects where DMF has said we recommend 1.5 to 1. Let's see, the walkway is a monopile design with the exception of the ends, which normally there's the double pile on the end for stability. Utilizing 10-inch diameter piles, I believe these would be fiberglass, with 17 to 19 foot spans between piles. 3 pilings in the marsh itself. Let's see. Decking is through flow grading. I think that is a great change to this project. Just looking through all my notes. We talked a lot last time about whether the structure was a water-dependent structure. I don't really want to get bogged down in it, but I want to make the point that a water-dependent structure, as we define it, I don't believe that this meets that definition of a water-dependent structure. If we wanted to change that in the future, when we go through and do our bylaw changes or reg changes, we should do that. And instead of saying something like promenade, which is what we say, which nobody says that much anymore, we could substitute in walkway. But that's neither here nor there because right now a regulation, that's not how it reads. Even if it was a water-dependent structure, Mr. Burgess does contend that it still meets the regulations. Let's see. What we also talked a lot about at the last meeting was whether walking over the marsh to get to the little beach was a viable option, or putting just a little bridge over the ditch itself. From having gone to this property numerous times in between hearings, just to look at it again for myself and try to evaluate it, this is what they say is a very wet marsh. It's a muddy marsh. Upper marsh would tolerate, as they said, walking better. This muddy, wet marsh would, even if you just put a bridge over the little ditch, the rest of the marsh I do feel would be pretty highly impacted by traversing over it, as opposed to some of our other projects which are more over high marsh. So as mitigation, they have to do at least 4 to 1 mitigation because the structure is in a salt marsh. That is composed of pruning some of the trees near the marsh edge to get rid of the shading, 3,000 square feet of additional plantings in the buffer as well as the resource area itself, invasive removal, proposing cleaning out the ditch. I would just, when and if you talk to mosquito control and do that, I'd like to be part of the conversation, because if they're gonna do it, I wanna know how. And also, I've seen instances, and it's mostly with freshwater ecosystems that I've seen when they cleaned out the ditches, they tend to pile a lot of the debris immediately adjacent, which would be detrimental for this project. So we wanna make sure if they do it, that does not get done here. You mentioned the raking of the rack. Maybe that's on an as-needed basis type thing, with notification for us. You know, a little bit of rack is not a bad thing. A foot or two thick of rack is not a good thing. So, I did visit, I got permission from the owner, from Mark, to visit the property in Chatham that they alluded to, as well as I went back and visited the Thal property on 10 Chase Street, because it was mentioned in this application. So I was really pleasantly surprised by the property in Chatham, and I sent you all photos, I believe, of that. That was a project done by Mr. Norgio here, and having been done in June and July of this past year, you other than where the pilings, of course, physically were themselves, there was no change in the density of the marsh, the density of the vegetation in the marsh underneath. And you can contest, I got down and looked underneath, to look to the side and underneath to see if there was a change in the density of the vegetation, and there really wasn't. And that was actually not through flow grading, that was a wood decking. I believe that was 3/4 inch spacing there.
Yes, it was.
The piles, Piles are bigger there too. 12 inch. I really saw no damage. I did see, you could tell, I mean, there was like a tiny little track, or not even a track, I wouldn't call it, but you could tell that there was a tiny bit of disturbance, but it was 6 months after. So, and that wasn't where the structure itself was. It was off to the side, and it was barely noticeable. Like, unless you were really looking, you wouldn't have noticed it. So definitely would have been back to original condition within the year of, which is what DEP allows you to do. So I too would have expected more. If you put a structure in the middle of summer, you would expect a little bit more marsh damage, and there really wasn't. So Chris did a very good job of that.
Thank you.
And similar to Thal is in the river, a little different, lot less marsh there, but still monopile design. There was a beach area there where it looks like wrack had accumulated, and that's what killed off any salt marsh vegetation potentially there. But there was no damage to the marsh, other than where the piles are, which we know, for that structure either. So, with the one change I mentioned of going up the additional 9 inches and out an additional 2 or 3 feet onto the beach, I would recommend approval of the project under the Act and bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Wayne, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, Alan?
No comments.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, the only question I would have for the applicant is whether or not the applicant would be willing to go along with Amy's recommendation with regard to the height.
Yeah, we thought about this before, because obviously we knew them. I certainly don't disagree. I want to make sure we don't build something that's so high that it spoils the vista for everybody else. I want to do the right thing here. So I don't know what Dr. Burdick thinks. Do you think is it going to help or not? I mean, that would be the only thing I would ask. That would be I'm willing to go ahead, but I want to make sure we're not doing something that actually doesn't do any benefit. So because I know I think the town is actually lower, right? What you're proposing, I think we said, okay, this is what you're proposing. Let's make sure that what you're proposing actually won't cause any damage. And so we'll go with what you're proposing. Now you're asking us to do more than you're proposing, and I'm going, well, I don't know if you're going to change what you're proposing.
We are.
So if you're going to change what you're proposing, I'm happy to go along with it. But
It's mostly that DMF has recommended it, and we've been consistent.
Yeah, I mean,
but I'm
2 feet.
happy to.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to go. I just don't want to build something that people look at and go, why did they go that high? It doesn't seem necessary. That would be the only thing. But I don't know if you want to put it to. Is there anything, or you just?
I'd go up.
All right, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, so you're willing to,
I'm willing,
okay.
yes. We all, my wife is here.
And the only other question that I would have, I know you had spoken a little bit with regard to timing. Assuming that you get the approval tonight, what would your timing be for the totality of this project, including the mitigation that you discussed?
As far as a construction standpoint,
Construction and the mitigation.
I have a pretty busy winter in front of me, so I would not probably be there until May, June.
Mm-hmm. And when would, if you went there in May, when would you be completed with your work?
It's probably a 2-week project.
Okay.
So
So
it's
you'd be
a short
completed
window.
before the beginning of June then?
Yes,
Potential, okay.
in that
And-
time frame, yes.
And how about the mitigation?
We could, ideally, we'd get in before that, so we could do that, we could do our work before May. We're under
Okay.
contract already.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That was all I had.
Good, thank you. Stan, do you have questions?
Just a comment. I guess I take exception to the fact that with these monopile docks, that there's no impact at all from any shading over the marsh. And I guess it's only based on my opinion, based on some of the 2 that I've seen installed already. And that's it. I disagree with that comment.
So, Stan, you're saying that you disagree that there won't be any impact to the marsh. Is that correct?
Right.
Mostly due to the construction or the height or what?
From shading.
From shading?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know if anyone wants to address that now, or?
Well, it's my personal observation on a couple of the monopile docks that I've kind of historically followed since they've been put in place.
Okay. All right. Were those on the Herring River, Stan?
Yes.
Okay.
And were they 1.5 times higher than wide?
Mark, you might be able to address that.
Yes, from what I recall, they were 1.5 to the underlying structural member.
Which is what we're doing here, correct?
With the change, yes.
Were they 3 foot wide?
No, they were 4 feet wide.
Okay.
And one had grading, and did the 10 Chase have grading, or does it have decking?
Chase has grading.
So they both have
grading.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thanks, Stan. Mark, do you have any comments?
No remarks, thank you.
John?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I am impressed with the diligence with which the applicants have pursued mitigation here and trying to ensure that they're doing the right thing. Honestly, I'm not happy to see another substantial structure built in the resource area. But I'm willing to support this with Amy's recommendations. I have one question, which is about mosquito control. Amy, I think, mentioned mosquito control. Are mosquitoes an issue in a tidal area in salt water where there's those ditches will be washed a couple of times a day?
If, in certain areas of the marsh, because of the blockages, there is some stagnant water, and there are saltwater mosquitoes. Let me tell you, they're much worse than freshwater mosquitoes.
Yep.
So if you get, I think the whole goal is to promote as natural flushing. So the minor maintenance of these ditches would be a benefit for the marsh and for controlling the mosquito population. Mosquito control does do salt marshes on occasion.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. I had a couple of questions. The first one, Dr. Burdick, you mentioned that with respect to the marsh, that too much moisture is detrimental to it, and that this ditch you thought was, what, it was 2 feet deep or so?
I can't tell how deep the ditch is, but there's 2 blockages, and they're holding back the water, and that's what's saturating the marsh. So they're not, they're broken. It's broken in 2 places.
Okay, which accumulates the water, which negatively impacts the salt marsh, then, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So are there any plans, and I'll go to Mark with this one, to remediate that?
There are no plans. If we can connect with mosquito control, they're very interested in maintaining the ditches that they have, but at a shallower level. They have I believe, you can look at your records, Amy must know, they have a permit to maintain those mosquito ditches in the way they see fit. But I think a conversation with them and saying, we'd like this to be not a deep ditch, but a shallow ditch.
Yeah.
That would.
They have a lot of exemptions.
And they will be able to do that work without another permit.
Right.
Yeah, Seth Wilkinson actually was the one who proposed using them. I don't know if Seth's on the line, I don't know. because he said they did such good work and he had worked extensively with them before, so we were very comfortable working with them, knowing they do the right thing.
Okay. I mean, because the bottom line to, I think, this whole project is the impact on the salt marsh. And there've been a number of comments with respect to the depth of the ditch, the blockage in the ditch, and I've heard nothing as far as addressing those issues that will help improve the salt marsh, the viability of the salt marsh there, to address these particular concerns.
I mean, we can stipulate that we'll work with mosquito control to, I actually thought, Katrine, that was in there, but it might not be, I don't know, but we could stipulate we'll work with them to fix the ditch. We'd be very happy, we'd be very happy to do that, that was our plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's to your benefit, obviously, if these saltwater mosquitoes are as vile as Amy says they are.
Yeah, we might not have put it in, but that was a large part of our plan. It's one of the things we're grateful to.
All right, I mean, I would like to see that as part of the, formal part of the plan, that there be something in here to address these issues that you've raised with respect to the ditch itself. I know the ditch goes off of your property, and obviously that's outside of your control. You can't do anything about anything that's not on your property, but to the extent that it appears to drain on your property, I would think that you could take a lot of actions with respect to raising the level of the ditch, removing blockages in there, and that sort of a thing that would.
No, as I say, this is all our property. We want the most healthy marsh. It improves everything. I mean, that's why we want to get to the marsh, because it's fascinating. Right?
Yeah.
And so
adding
yeah,
nourishment be
100%. And
better?
I know my
Or
neighbour,
adding
our neighbour,
nourishment?
I know them particularly well, but
It'd be better
I'd
to
have
have
a
the mosquito
conversation
people
with them.
do
If
it.
we're going to do it, I'm sure we'd ask.
They don't need a permit.
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
Question for you on that vein. For instance, if they don't agree to do this, it's fairly minor from what I understand, the work that would need to be done to flush this out a little bit better. Would that be something, I mean, we could incorporate it in this permit is to clean out these ditches. Would that be something Wilkinson could assist with as part of the restoration? And it does seem like a fairly minor part. I know that Wilkinson is well-versed in a number of restoration type activities. If mosquito control didn't do it, is that something Wilkinson maybe could do? So.
Yeah, I know, Seth, I know you're there. I don't know if you want to comment. I know that he is the one.
Provide guidance.
Sure. Happy to comment through the chair.
He's asking you if you can.
Sure, absolutely, please.
Thank you. I've got a little delay on my side, so I apologize. I think that's a reasonable approach that Amy has laid out. We'd certainly want to work with mosquito control as the experts on the mosquito biology, and certainly not do anything that could potentially make it worse. I don't think that's too much of a risk, but we'd want to run any activities by them. But in the event that they didn't wish to conduct the work, if there were provisions in the permit to allow us to conduct that work, I think that's a very reasonable way to work through that.
Okay, good, thank you. That pretty much addresses the questions I had. Amy, you're comfortable mitigation requirements are being met?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And looking at the pictures of the property in Chatham, I noticed it looked like there were a lot of pilings in the marsh in that particular walkway that you visited out there.
We're closer together, yes.
Yeah. What was the spacing on those?
Those were 10 feet on center.
Okay, and these are going to be 15, is that right?
17 to 19.
17 to 19, so that really helps as well, raising the height, spacing out the pilings on that. And there are only 3 pilings here as opposed to, there are probably half a dozen, it looked like, in Chatham on that walkway out there.
30 of them in Chatham.
Yeah.
30?
30 pilings.
30.
16 in the marsh.
16.
But
So it's-
remember, in the bordering vegetated, because they had a
Same
freshwater
amount.
bordering vegetated wetland at that one,
Right.
landward of that, which was interesting, because there's
Yeah.
a freshwater seep coming in there.
Yeah, the whole walkway
there.
is,
Yeah.
the whole walkway is 320 feet long. It's split evenly between the BVW and the salt marsh. And it's also high marsh like this is. It sees very little tidal flow. So
Yeah.
the conditions are almost very nearly identical to this installation.
Okay. I thank you for taking Amy out there, because those pictures were very helpful.
It's awesome. It really is awesome to see that that can be done that way. And he's the only one I've seen do it.
Yeah.
The others have been somewhat short of a train wreck.
Great. Well, good. And I saw the pictures of the walkway next to it that had been removed, and the train tracks practically going through the marsh on that one. So I thought that was very helpful as well. And I mean, the last time we talked about this, I think our concerns were the impact to the marsh, the number of pilings that we were concerned about at that point. I don't think we really even addressed the concerns about the ditch. So you've really done a fabulous job, I think, as far as bringing in the people that presented the information we need to know as far as the impact from this particular project.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, and I mean, I'm comfortable with what you proposed here, with the condition that the ditch be addressed. So with that, I would open it up if there are any other questions from anybody else in the audience, or any other comments, questions, concerns from the commissioners? All right, hearing none. Should we have a motion on this?
Okay. I would like to move that we approve the notice of intent for 23 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U-4-32, with two conditions. One condition would be that the structure be raised an additional 9 inches in compliance with the recommendation of the Division of Marine Fisheries, and 2, that the applicant agree to work to improve the drainage capability of the ditch that runs through the marsh area.
Any comments? Discussion? Can we have a second then?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Wayne, you in?
I can't vote here.
Sorry, okay, it's a continuance, I apologize. Let's go through the agenda, online. Stan?
Aye.
Nay? Mark?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
Okay, so we have 5 to 1. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Ellen.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is order of conditions for 48 North Road, map 11, parcel A1.
Yep, let me know if you have any questions on the draft conditions. Special conditions.
Is this the little place on the road?
No,
No.
we'll talk about that next meeting.
Okay.
This is, the house itself is on the opposite side of the river. They have, the only thing they have on the river is a deck that goes out to a dock.
I know the one you're
It's
talking
south of that little house.
One question I had, Amy, is on number 5, you have a statement, no fertilizer shall be used, are to be used on this property, which to my reading would encompass the property across the road as well, because that's all the same address.
It's different map and parcel, though.
Okay, fine, wonderful, good.
I thought it would be a little too far-reaching to,
Oh, yeah, no, I agree, that's fine.
I'd like to, but no.
When I read property, I just assumed the 48 North Road
Oh,
was
sorry,
everything. Okay.
That's what I meant, is,
Can we change that then to parcel?
sure, parcel instead of
Okay.
property.
And I had no other comments from that. Anybody else have any comments on this?
No comment.
I just have a question about the item on no pruning. My recollection is that there is a large, is it an oak tree that has
Yeah.
a leader hanging way out over the water? And I know we discussed that when we were on the site, but I thought it looked like that was going to be a problem. But what is your take on this, Amy?
Their contractor has said that it wouldn't be an issue, that limb, and that that tree is, even though it is very weighted on that side, it's not showing any signs of, leaning, the whole tree itself, or the tree being sick or anything like that. So their intent is to leave it.
And that's Lindsay you're quoting there.
I think actually,
Mr. Strode?
same contract.
this?
Yes, actually, the contractor for the previous project is the contractor for this project.
So I wasn't here for the
Yeah.
meeting before.
Sorry, Chris Norgio is speaking at the microphone. He's also
Oh,
be the
I
contractor
see.
for this. So-
Okay.
Okay.
This is a vinyl wall.
Yes.
It needs to be driven. And the sheets are like 16 feet long, or actually they're 20 feet long. So in order to stand the sheets up, the branch really has to go. It sticks out, it's across the dock, and it's over the wing wall.
Okay.
It'd be
I was going by
impossible to
what
do
I
the
was-
project without losing a portion of that
Okay.
branch.
I'm sorry if I misspoke. I was told by a different.
I wasn't here, so you didn't speak.
Okay. I think the hope was that we couldn't, and we were told, but you are the actual contractor, so if you're saying it can't be, it is a huge limb, but I think if you were to take that limb off, there's enough of the vertical part of the tree that it would still be okay.
I think
Well, I was raising the concern because I thought that limb hanging way out would eventually pull the trio. So,
It could eventually.
I think it was a good opportunity to remove it.
I have no problem with
Yeah.
it. I know the
I-
the owners really wanted to keep it if they could, but I'm sure that they want the protection of the bulkhead more, so. That's a good point, John. Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other comments? Any questions on the project while we have Chris here? Nope. Then I move we approve the order of conditions for 48 North Road, map 11, parcel A1.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
comments,
Comments, please.
discussion, please? We have to modify that language about no pruning.
I will
So-
change that to allow for the limbing of that one tree.
So I'll amend my
Okay.
motion then that we approve it with the proviso that the overhanging branch will be permitted to be removed.
And I'll second the amended motion.
Okay? So let's go back. All in favor?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
All right, thanks for that clarification, John. Good.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda, notice of, order of conditions rather, for 10 Captain Scott Road, map 103, parcel W1-19.
We received the revised plan this morning, showing that the dock was gonna move like an additional 25 feet to the east. That's in your Dropbox. That was the thing we were waiting on. Just wanted to make sure that that was gonna actually happen. So that did, which is good. And I made the change to the plan date on the special conditions. Do you have any questions on the conditions?
No. Anybody have any comments on the general conditions or the special conditions?
Wayne, you'll get a copy. It's in Dropbox, but you'll get a paper packet next time.
Okay, good.
Actually, I need your address.
So hearing none, I move we approve the order of condition for 10 Captain Scott Road, map 103, parcel W1-19.
I'll second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Wayne, you're abstaining, is that right?
I can't vote.
He can't, not even an abstention.
Not even abstention, okay.
Sorry, Wayne.
That's all right.
We'll get you there. Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Now we have a certificate of compliance for 9 Stanley Road, map 81, parcel A11.
This is on Hinkley Pond. And they wanted to remove 3 pitch pines, remove dead and dying shrubs, selectively prune and plant some natives. They were really good to work with. They did the work largely themselves, except for some of the bigger tree work. And the work's been done. Recommend a certificate of compliance. It's very natural looking. The bank is much more stable now, so.
Great, good. Can we have a motion on this, please?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the certificate of compliance for 9 Stanley Road, map 81, parcel A 11.
Can we have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Stanley?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes, thank you. Next item on the agenda then is the minutes. I hope everybody had a chance to look at them. I'm looking furiously for my notes that I made on those things.
Well, speaking for myself, I managed to read the first 2, January 20th and 26th, and I have a bunch of comments of those. I didn't get to any of the others.
Okay. Do you want to run through them then?
Start with January 20th.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's see, I'm looking at my notes, not at the minutes, but for 26 and 32 Neal Road and 43 Saquatucket Bluffs, there's a reference to Cliff Road. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out where Cliff Road was. I don't see any.
I see it all over.
I'm not sure what the right reference is, but it's between Cliff Road and the Judges, they said. And I don't know what that means.
No, we can. We're gonna take Cliff Road, enhance the beach from Neal Road to the Judge's property.
Okay. Oh,
I'm just gonna take that.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't know where that came from. But we'll find all the places where it alludes to that and fix that. I found
okay.
3 here already.
So then in that same section, on that action, there's a reference to 1,000 acre cubic yards, which again,
Cubic yards.
perhaps 1,000 cubic yards.
I gotta find that.
I
see it.
Let me, you see it?
No.
Then on the 5th line from the bottom of page 3, there's a sentence that says it ends with in favor of not using fencing in this project, positive aspect of this project. That needs to be fixed. And
Page 3. Oh, I see it.
are you with me?
Yeah, I got it.
And then under 28 Wawatesi, the 5th line in, there's a sentence that ends with existing shell walkway in order to avoid not to have to cutting native shrubs. That needs to be fixed. And then
What page is that on?
it's under 28 Wawatesi.
Right, but there's 3 pages for that one.
Okay, wait a minute. It's probably at the very beginning. Hang on, this is, no, it's 26. Hang on. January 20th. Yeah, these were long minutes. So I'll just find it. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
And just while I find this, the other thing is there were at least 3 places, perhaps more, where intertidal was transcribed as intertitle. if you got that.
I understand. We had somebody, I mean, somebody was helping us with
Yeah,
minutes.
right, I
was
get-
not familiar with all this, so.
So,
Melissa cleaned them up quite a
the
bit even before she got them to you.
Okay, the previous comment about cutting native shrubs is the fifth line in on the first paragraph for 28 Wawatesi.
I got it, yep. Thank you.
And I don't know whether, I also have notes for the January 26th, if you want me to do that now or wait until other people
Let's
comment.
wait, those are all the ones you have for the 20th?
Yeah,
Does anybody else have any comments on the 20th minutes? Somebody want to take over as chair while Ernie stepped out for a minute and ask for a motion on these?
Yeah, could I have a motion on approving the minutes for January 20th, 2021?
I move we approve the minutes for January 20th, 2021,
With changes.
with the changes as previously discussed.
Yeah, I don't think I can second because I wasn't present, so therefore I'm abstaining from the vote on that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Stan. All in favor?
I abstain.
I abstained too, I wasn't present.
Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
All right. Motion passes, thank you. So the minutes from January 26th, 2021.
Okay, so I have a few comments. One is in the section that discusses Chapter 310-3, in the third paragraph where it talks, this is where the change in the size of vernal pools is. What is written there, this is the end of a sentence, is wetlands greater than wetlands greater than 1,000 square feet for banks, reservoirs, lakes, lakes and ponds. So looking at the existing text, that's, again, that must have been transcribed improperly because the existing text is something like wetlands greater than 3,000 square feet, semicolon banks, semicolon reservoirs, semicolon lakes, semicolon ponds greater than 3,000 square feet, and then there's some other items. So whatever the change is, it should be properly changing that text.
Mm-hmm.
So the new text, and this is where I'm a little confused, and in the draft article, it just says change 3,000 to 1,000 in this paragraph, but I'm not sure that's supposed to refer to just wetlands or wetlands and ponds. But either way, the change, it should read wetlands greater than 1,000 square feet, semicolon banks, semicolon reservoirs, semicolon lakes, semicolon ponds greater than 1,000 square feet. Is that the intention?
Yes.
Okay. So that's,
We'll fix that.
then on page 5, where the topic is minimum water depth for a dock, and it's quoting Rendon. It says, but asked that it not include a sum determination to get 3 feet without dredging. I don't know what that should be, but that's not right. SUM, a sum Summary determination, is that what he said? I don't know.
Was it in favor of the 3 foot requirements.
That's on page 5, John?
Yeah, in the
Page
middle of the
5.
page. Under
Under
public and
input from town
department.
officials and the public?
Public and.
Yes,
departmental.
and there's a paragraph where both Hines and John Rendon are quoted, and Rendon is second. And it refers to a some determination to get 3 feet without dredging.
I think John, I will have to look back at that probably. John Rendon, he was in favor of the 3 foot requirement, but he didn't want us to say whether or not, he wanted the dredging to, I think, to be site specific and not a set yes or
Right.
no, there can't be dredging, can or can't be dredging to get to that 3 feet. So we'll review that. But I
Okay.
did it.
So I have 2 more things. One is page 6, item 4.2. First sentence, it says 1.1, it should be 1:1. And
Yep.
then, are you with me?
Yep.
And then page 7, second paragraph, it says removal of the 0 to 50. I wasn't sure about that, whether it's a reference to removal from the 0 to 50 or removal of the 0 to 50 guidelines. I think maybe that's what it's supposed to say, but that just seems unclear to me.
A removal from the 50-foot buffer, it should be.
Okay. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only other comment I had in addition to that was on page 7, Amy. You talk about the Waterways Commission, and it's capitalized C in there. Now, let's see.
Waterways Committee.
Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to say. S should be A. Top of page 7. S should be A.
Oh, yeah, right. I saw that.
Yeah. Can you figure out where it is, John? I'm looking for it quickly here, and I should have printed this out. Top of page 7. Well, I'll look for it again, Amy, rather than keeping
I see it, well, I
people
see
here.
something else though, but Mr. Prof suggests
Yeah.
instead of suggest.
And then top of page 8, suggested. See, I think the problem is, I'll give you my comments later. I had a number of other ones in this here that.
Yeah, you can email it.
Yeah. No
It's
point
up
in
to you
taking
if you're comfortable voting with the changes and we make them, or if you want to see them at the next meeting, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, nobody saw any material changes that they would like to have also made to these. I mean, most of what I have are all editorial, so there's nothing that's significant here.
I got the significant ones from John.
Yeah, yeah, I think those are great. You're gonna take the title from Carolyn pretty soon, John, with this stuff.
Uh-oh. It takes a lot of time. I don't know. Carolyn must have had a lot of spare time.
Yeah. All right, so can I have a motion to approve the minutes for January 26th as amended?
I will move to approve the minutes from January 26, 2021 as amended.
You have a second?
I'll second it, Stan.
Thanks, Stan. All in favor? Jim?
I abstain.
I abstain. Alan? Okay. Stan?
Aye.
Is that an aye? Mark?
Yes.
Yep, Mark?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
And I'm in favor, so motion approves, motion passes. I saw, I didn't see the February and November 3rd minutes in the
No.
Dropbox. I did see September 1st.
Yeah, but that's not on our list, so
Okay,
we can't do it.
all right, good.
So we'll do.
So
we'll
that
do
takes
those
care of the
last time.
minutes. Next
Yep.
item on the agenda is discussion and possible vote on updates on violations. Amy?
Yep. I am happy to let you know that all 3 violations have resolved themselves. But we have one new one. So 11 River Bend, that was the property south of Lower County on the river that recently changed hands, and the new owner came into you last time and he couldn't remove, there was one, they had 3 floats attached to a bulkhead, and the commission had only allowed 2. So he had to remove the 3rd one. He was happy to do it. He couldn't get a contractor. This is a new owner, contracted to do it for a little bit later. So it's done. It is gone. And the commission had said if it was gone by this meeting, you would rescind the fine. So why don't we do that one by one? I recommend so that you rescind the $300 fine you issued for 11 River Bend.
Okay, any
Okay.
comments? Not hearing none then, Jim, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we rescind the fine for 11 River Bend.
I'll second that. All in favor, Stanley?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And Wayne?
I can't vote.
Gotta get you there. Next meeting, maybe. We'll get you up to full steam on this stuff. I vote aye, so the motion passes. 7 Prince Charles, Amy?
Yep, so 7 Prince Charles, this was one that we've been working on for quite a long time. The deck has been removed. That's within the 50-foot buffer. And because of that too, after the last meeting, he wanted to keep it in longer. I said no. This was an illegal deck that was built pretty close to the waterway on Long Pond. So he did remove it. We had previous fines, and he's paid those and has mitigation that he has to do. So I think this additional $300 fine was really just to kind of push him to finish doing it, and he did. So I'd recommend you rescind that $300 fine for 7 Prince Charles.
Any discussion, comments? I'll move rescind the $300 fine for 7 Prince Charles.
I'll second.
Second. Stanley, all in favor? Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Alan? And I vote aye, so that motion passes. 0 snow in, Amy.
So this is, this one, I've not they did remove the float that had been stored on the marsh.
Did they
But-
take it off-site?
I didn't see it there today, so.
Or no place
They took it
on-site,
somewhere. I
right?
didn't- I mean, the house, they own there's 2 houses that they own on the water, and then they own another house across the street. So I didn't see it. I mean, I looked, but I didn't look.
Okay,
They weren't on the waterfront parcels, put it that way.
okay.
But I don't recommend rescinding it. I didn't hear from them really at all. They did it, but I feel like we've had an issue with this one before, and we've sent them a letter before. So we sent them the fine this time, and they did it. I don't recommend for this one rescinding the fine. I think it'll be good to have a record of this one that we did do it, and also hopefully it'll dissuade them in the future. If they had contacted us after and maybe pled their case a little bit, or at least acknowledged it, maybe I would, but it doesn't. I'd recommend keeping it.
All right,
You don't have to do any motion there.
okay.
Also on Snow Inn Road, one that we had an issue with last year, we are again gonna have an issue with this year, because it's when you when you come on Snow Inn Road from 28, it's the first house on the left that's on the water. There's been floats, they've always had a float on that marsh, and again, this year, and they've kind of tied it, so it's strange, if you drive by there, look, but the float's off the end of the dock, but it's attached between the end of, it's attached by rope between the end of the dock and then tied to trees on the landward part. So it's kind of, it moves back and forth with the tide. I mean, I'm guessing it's to keep it somewhere to the site, but in doing so, every time the tide comes in and out, it is scraping everything there. So I would recommend, I have to get, just find out what property number that is, but if you're, I would issue the fine and have them take it off and then report to you at the next meeting.
And they would still be subject to the seasonal removal requirement, right? Regardless of where it is.
Right.
So.
And it's, I mean, even if they don't have an order, because that dock has an old order of conditions, but, so they don't probably have it's seasonal, but they wouldn't have a storage condition on there. But if it's damaging the marsh, as this is doing,
Yeah.
you can have them remove it.
All right.
So, we have sent them letters in the past, so it's not like they don't know.
Do you suggest we send them a letter with a deadline and then impose fines from that date?
Normally, if this was a first offense, I would say yes, because there's been numerous at this address, and I'll put it on the next agenda, but I would like to issue a fine, and then you can decide at the next meeting if you want to uphold it or not.
So you want to vote on a fine this evening?
You don't know, because I don't have the address number for you.
Okay, all right.
I can do it, and then, I mean, this is how I usually do it. When I come across a violation, I don't wait till a meeting to have you authorize it.
Right.
I'll issue it, and then you can determine if you want to keep it or not at the next meeting.
All right.
If they hadn't done this in the past, then I would give them some leniency.
And you've
but
already sent them notice?
Past couple years, yeah.
Yeah. But this year?
Nope.
Okay, so I'd like to see
Because
it.
it just came out, because it
Yeah.
was, as of a couple weeks ago, the last time I checked it, when I was driving, it was still at the end of the dock.
Okay.
So they just recently did this.
What I suggest you might want to do is send them a notice and tell them that this will be an issue on the next agenda for our next meeting. And if it's not removed by then we will be discussing the imposition of fines.
That's fine. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to do it today, so.
Yeah. Okay, good. Anything else, or we move right on to the Bell's Neck Bog?
We can move on to the proposed harvest and sale of the vines, yeah. Unless anybody
Just as
else.
a question, Lothrop, any update on that?
No, there's a few litigation cases, and I can't give you an update anyway, because we're not in executive session.
Yeah.
We're gonna have an executive session at the next meeting. Actually, I was hoping, would people be able to meet at 6 next time instead of 6:30? So we could do an executive session first?
Yes.
And have town council come?
I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Or at least some feedback, or at least something in writing from council. We got sued today.
We did?
Yep.
Okay. Not the first time.
No, it's actually, it's already been sued under the act, and now it's under the bylaw, so we already knew it was coming.
Okay. All right.
Can you all meet at 6 next time?
I can.
Yes.
Anyone that cannot, Stan's not here, we'll follow up with him when he gets back.
Yeah, John and Mark, you're good for 6 o'clock next time?
Yes.
I'm okay.
We got several things to talk about in executive session, so.
All right. Good. So moving on to Bell's Neck Bogs.
Yep, so at the last meeting, Alan, if you want to talk about this more, you might want to recuse yourself and sit in the audience, but that's to you and the chairman. The last time it was brought to our attention that, people might be interested in harvesting some of the vines off a portion of the bog that was more recently farmed at the Bell's Neck, basically when you drive in the section on your immediate left. And there's some surplus equipment still left. So the commission, we'd had so many conversations over the years of what we were going to do with those bogs, so you wanted to see what you had voted to do. And I sent you the link to the video of that meeting where you decided on option 2, which was to naturalize, allow the bogs to naturalize. But in the minutes, it seemed like a lot of people wanted to have the option of letting a pick your own or do something like that. You know, letting people go out and pick cranberries on the bogs. This all, basically what we were trying to get at is, can the town just put this out for bid, essentially? Or does it have to have a request for determination of applicability filed with the Conservation Commission? So it is, to me, still a little ambiguous, because your vote you took was to allow the bogs to naturalize, but then let people still pick them if they wanted to go and pick. So but we have also flooded the bogs occasionally in the past few years. Before we made a decision, we flooded those bogs because you weren't sure what decision you were going to make. So I would say that there has been activity on those bogs in the past 5 years to maintain those bogs until you made the decision, which wasn't until a year ago, to naturalize. So I think it can be done either way. So that's why I've already started to prepare the request for determination to file with you if you decided that an RDA was filed. But I am leaning that because of the flooding that we did in order to maintain those bogs until we made a decision last year, that is maintenance of land and agricultural use, and that it does not need an RDA. If the commission, but it is somewhat ambiguous because that bog has not produced, commercially produced. There hasn't been a commercial harvest there in the past 5 years. But there has been activity to maintain that bog.
Okay.
So basically, we need a little direction, how the commission feels. Is this agriculturally exempt still, what's being proposed? Or do you want to see an RDA for the removal, basically the cutting of the vines, not excavation of them, the cutting of the vines to be sold off a 100 by 100 square foot area, or 100 by 100 area, sorry, in the sale of some of the surplus equipment that's still out there.
Let me just a point of clarification then. The issue that we're addressing is not continuing to maintain the bogs by continuing to flood them, for example, but we're just talking strictly about harvesting the vines. Is that right?
What's been requested is the activity is to harvest the vines.
Yeah, all right.
So without getting too much into the weeds of everything else, how we've made, is this property still land and agriculture, does it still meet the 5 years?
Yeah.
And I would say yes, because up until a year ago, we were still managing the water
Okay.
to preserve the right if we wanted to. So what you would allow, basically if you said an RDA is not needed, the town can go out and put out to bid and allow this to happen. Now, hopefully, they would have input as far as the protection of the natural resources. They would hopefully have input from myself as well, which I'm assuming they will, to make sure the practices are as friendly as they possibly can be to harvest the vines and to leave some of the roots viable still so we get some regrowth.
The roots will stay there because they only clip off the top.
Right.
That won't be an issue. And also, the act of harvesting the vines is part of the act of growing cranberries.
Right.
It happens. So the thing is still in production.
Yeah.
technically.
So actually, what you're suggesting is harvesting the vines will be continuing the practice of agricultural?
Absolutely.
It will, so instead of, I mean, right now, we haven't done anything to those bogs other than get out a few invasive things. We haven't managed the water in a year.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it would start the clock again, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean,
Clock
that's-
hasn't been stopped though, so it won't start it again. It's been, you've been putting water on, so it,
Not this past year.
well, it doesn't matter. You gotta be within a 5-year span.
I didn't mean it, I understand what you're meaning. I think we are trying to say things in a similar way. I agree that it's still an agricultural use, because 1 year ago, we put water on it, so for like another several years, it's still
Yeah.
in use.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you.
okay.
So, but it's up to the commission. As to your read of it, I did tried to spend some time on this, because it's not something I work with every day either, so.
Yeah. Has town council looked at that?
No,
Do you think they should?
I do not think it is necessary. I didn't ask council, because every time I have to use council on a different topic, I have to ask in writing to use council. So if the commission wants me to use council.
I hear you. No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking.
They still build a commission for the town when you,
They build a town, I don't see it.
when I was around here before, they build by the minute. They called Jimmy Fowler and he had a
I
little
don't-
thing by his phone, he'd go ding like that.
No, we're not like
I would
that.
see bills for 3 minutes and 4 minutes.
No,
Oh, God, it was incredible.
I don't know, I don't see the
They
bills.
don't do it quite that way anymore.
I don't think so, but
And now they charge, $250 an hour instead of 50.
I don't know if it's like a lump sum to have on retainer, or if it's by the hour still, I don't know.
So any,
So I'm interested in your comments.
discussion on this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, maybe it's because of my background, but I would think it would be helpful to get town council to weigh in on this issue.
And what will that provide us?
Well, that will provide us with whether or not the interpretation that we have is correct.
Okay. And in the event of a challenge, you say that would strengthen
In
our...
the event of a challenge, yeah, I mean, if we go ahead without town council review and we get challenged, we're gonna have to bring in town council anyhow. It would be proactive to get an opinion prior so that we know whether or not we're at risk for being challenged.
I think maybe the more expeditious route to that, instead of going to council, is just to file the RDA and have the commission review it.
Okay, let me ask you this, Amy, maybe because I'm not all that familiar with,
No, go ahead.
how does the filing of the RDA impact whether or not this land is still in agricultural use?
Oh, I thought, so you're asking, I guess I was thinking that the work proposed, it would be an exempt that's what the determination of applicability would determine whether or not the work proposed is an exempt activity for land and agricultural use, yeah. It'd be the same
Sort of coming at it from both ends of the
I guess.
question.
I'm just trying to,
Okay.
it's up to you folks.
So once we harvest the vines, then it puts it back into agricultural use, though.
It already is. It still is. Still is.
Technically,
because of the water.
Because of the water.
That's not changed.
Yeah, Mark?
It's still in use. That hasn't changed. We're stumbling over a timeline that hasn't been stopped and started yet. So, I mean, the RDA to me is an active utility. If the desire to not continue the property farming, to harvest the vines, I think is a worthy venture. And I would suggest we go forward with it and with any appropriate care thereafter.
Yeah, if you harvest the vines, they're gonna come back the next year. They just grow. You cut 'em off,
Exactly.
you could technically cut them off every year if you wanted to.
John, Stan, any comments, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have comments. I guess first of all, I think it's great to harvest the vines and use them somewhere else. On the other hand, I am 100% behind the decisions that have already been made by the Conservation Commission to let the area naturalize. And I don't want to see any actions that we're taking here change that. And I am no expert. I don't know about the agricultural exemption. I'm a little concerned here that there's an effort to draw out the agricultural exemption in order to, at some time, lease this back out for full cranberry production. I would not support that, and I don't want to see that happen. I just, I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I agree with Mark. We should let the harvesting go on, the harvesting of the vines. And I'm also fully supportive of casual, informal, unmonitored picking of cranberries where they continue to grow, but I would not be in favor of continued cultivation of those cranberry vines.
You know,
I think we already made a very firm and clear decision about what we're doing with the bogs, and I want to see that continue. And I'm not sure what the appropriate action right now is to ensure that that happens.
You know, the one thing that I struggle with when we talk about these bogs is that from my perspective anyhow, we've got two distinct areas, three actually, but at least I'll group them into two. The one being the northern bog, north of the access road, and the rest of it being the second parcel. And you know, having been in there, having seen the state of the northern bog, the condition of it, you know, I have no problem with the southern portion, the southern bogs being naturalized and doing anything we can to support, to exacerbate that. But I struggle with the northern bogs because having been in there this past fall and seeing the people that have come in there and really taken advantage of the crop that's available to them, it's, you know, it's rewarding from my perspective. And I know that the Board of Selectmen, when we've talked to them about these bogs, you know, their initial inclination was, well, we want to continue to lease them. It's part of our heritage. We can't. I think everybody agrees that, you know, we were really unable to release those bogs. But that doesn't mean that we can't continue to preserve that northern bog for the benefit of the town itself. And I think we're sort of, you know, I think that from a public perspective and from a Board of Selectmen perspective, you know, that's something that I think a lot of people would be in favor of. I don't think it would take a whole lot of work on anyone's effort to flood them a couple of times a year, and I'm not sure what else. I defer to my experts here on what else would be needed to have a viable crop in there for another couple of years anyhow. But that's sort of my cut on it, that when we talk about these things, we have to look at them from a different perspective depending on whether we're looking at the northern portion or the southern parcels.
So I have a question about that, which is, you're speaking of the northern section of the bog, but the entire northern section is not still productive with cranberries, right? It's the eastern half of the eastern segment of the northern part. Some of the rest of the bog has already the northern bog has already begun to get overgrown, right?
Yeah, That's
Yeah.
the most
So-
northern portion.
Is
The most
that the case? I didn't
Yeah.
venture in there to really look and see what the state of
north
that
of where
portion was.
we were. So immediately to your left as you drive in, that portion is still viable. Farther up
But
to
even the
north-
western side of the southern side of the northern part, if you follow. The thing that's to your left, just as you get to the bog, right?
Right.
That's getting overgrown as well.
True.
It's further over towards the reservoir.
Right,
but
where you get closer
Anyway,
to the culvert.
it's sort of splitting hairs. My question is, if there is a section that everybody agrees is still productive, and yes, we'd like to take some minimal steps to allow there to be fruitful cranberries there for a while, can just that piece be flooded without flooding the whole thing and disrupting the process of naturalizing the parts that are already gone?
That one bog can be, yes, you can separate that one from the others. There's boards and culvert and pipes in between, so you can separate that. I want to, if I may for a minute, get back to John's question about making sure that this isn't an effort to maybe either release the bogs in the future or keep them all out for production. So I know that the commission voted to go with option 2, which is naturalization, with the option of letting hand picking and stuff happening. So in order for that property to be leased again, which is under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission, it couldn't, even if this activity were to take place with the harvesting of the vines, the commission would still have to vote to put the property back out to lease. So right now, there's no lease on there. You voted to naturalize it. I think harvesting the vines, which is not destroying the wetland plant. I think this one activity, I don't think it would set a huge precedent for saying, okay, then we can just have these bogs completely restored and all farmed again. So I hopefully that's a little bit of security in that. It just because we allowed this activity potentially to happen doesn't mean somebody can just come in and lease it, because we'd have to approve that and change our decisions.
Yeah, I suspect with the size of the area that's still productive, that you wouldn't find many people that would be willing to lease
No,
that
it would
anyhow.
need a lot of work to do the rest.
Can I
Yeah.
say something at this point, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Dan?
I kind of agree with John, and I'm trying to remember some of the stuff of what we agreed, and I kind of agree with what Amy just said about that portion of the bog. My recollection, well, going back to what John said, I mean, I was against the vote that we made, but I agree that since the vote was done, we should abide by that vote. We shouldn't go back and try to recreate the wheel again. Now, that was the vote at the time to let the bog naturalize. At the same time, my recollection was that this one area that we would continue to maybe find some use for it with, picking for the community or whatever, as long as it was feasible. And I thought that's what and that's what Amy is saying. And I think part of that is harvesting those vines as part of that whole concept as well. So I think we're really getting hung up on a lot of this. I mean, I think I don't know about the commercial aspects like John says, but I mean, we should go ahead. The vines should, if they're useful, let somebody to get to use them. If we can still offer any, free picking for the community, let's do that as long as that's feasible. But again, we're not going back on the vote that we did, right or wrong, That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I hope that's where I was coming. That's sort of the message that I relayed when I made my comments too. But that's You sort of summarized it, and I agree with you 100%. Any other comments or discussions? So, tonight, is the recommendation then that we vote on allowing the vines in this bog to be harvested?
That is my recommendation, that you allow that to happen, because the land is still in agricultural use.
Yep. And I'm in favor of that.
I'd just like to ask a question for clarification. Now, who would do the actual harvesting of the vines?
It would it would be the successful bidder.
Okay, so that would go out to bid through a regular town procedure?
Correct.
To come in and do that?
Correct.
Okay, so whoever won the bid would be the one that would do it?
Yep.
Okay,
And I
thank
would
you.
want to, work with them and speak with
Yeah.
them about methodology and stuff. As
Okay.
much, to make sure it's not gonna permanently damage anything, and also just for my own edification.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
So to go through the whole formal RFP process then.
okay, fine, thank you.
If I may just ask a question, what is the bidding process?
Dan, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Not well, no.
How about now?
There you go. That's better.
Okay, I must have gotten too close. Going back to that question, then, how does that, who initiates that a bid, that we're putting it out to bid, us?
no, the administration office has been contacted about it. Administration
Okay.
would put out the bid, or the RFP.
So we'd be completely removed from that. Good. All right. So,
Question?
any other comments? Mark, yeah?
Yep, I have a question, please.
Yes, please.
Just to be clear, the RFP is handled by the town administrator's office. At this point, what our mission to do is to decide to harvest the vines or not. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yep, and sell the surplus goods.
That's fine. Okay, thank you.
So our motion would be to, number one, harvest the vines, and number two, allow the town to dispose of any surplus equipment
Yep,
on the.
allow the town to put out an
lots.
RFP for the harvest of a 100 by 100-foot section of vines and excess equipment, cranberry
Okay.
equipment.
Why only 100 by 100?
That was the person who requested to do this, that was their,
Well, if that's the case, then there are more vines there, a lot more than 100 by 100.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody else might want to do some too.
this is just in the area that's like most viable with the least amount of,
The dog leg shaped,
least amount of
I'm
weeds.
familiar with it.
So should we, is it reasonable to expand that to any viable vines that exist in the northern bog?
It gets a little hairy, because like there's some fringe area, like there's a solid area that of 100 by 100 that it's pretty much all cranberries.
Yeah,
Once,
because we want to naturalize anything outside of that, the harvestable area.
If you only do 100 by 100, that'll leave a lot for the people to come pick. So
right, I think it's
Leave it
just to
alone, I
stay
guess.
safe, to do just
Yeah.
100 by 100. If you get a ton more interest, maybe we talk about another small area, but we would have to map it out. I
Yeah.
don't want I don't want it willy-nilly.
Yeah, all right. So hearing no other comments, I'd make a motion that we approve the town presenting an RFP to the public to harvest the vines in a 100 by 100-foot section on the northern bog, as well as dispose of any excess equipment that currently exists within that bog, those bogs.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
So Amy had suggested at the beginning that Alan recuse himself, and I would just request that anybody who thinks they might be bidding should recuse themselves.
I would agree.
I want to make sure I was recused. Now, what about the pump and motor that's in there? Who determines what the value of that is? If that's worth a few $1,000 bucks.
I assume the
You
town
know, you
would.
don't want somebody to come in and say, yeah, I'll give you town $50 for it and take off with it if the thing's worth some money.
But that's a town decision. I mean, all we do is,
So, yeah,
we turn it over to the
I'm
experts.
just wondering who is it in the town that's gonna determine the value of it?
Yeah, I don't think we're in a
I mean,
position
it's not
necessarily.
our purview,
Yeah.
no question about it, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, the town will have to look at, I'll ask.
Yeah, check into
So
it,
I was-
maybe the mechanic or somebody from the highway department can look at it and make a determination
Yeah.
on the value or something, you know?
Yeah, we have some
I don't wanna
pretty,
see it go to, like I said, for $50.
And how do they, well, I'm sure it might be someone that's not local too that would want to
Could
bid
be.
on this.
Mhm.
So, yeah, okay,
You might be surprised. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
you said it's a Stevens variety there, right?
Yeah. Put an ad in the cranberry growers newsletter or something.
Yeah.
People from our group might be interested too, who knows?
Right, so we have a motion on the table, it's been seconded. All in favor? Jim?
Aye.
Wayne, you can vote on this one, I think, can't you? No?
He can't, he's, as an alternate member, he
Oh,
can't
I'm
vote at
sorry,
all.
that's right, I keep forgetting, I apologize for that.
All right.
You put it in that perspective, now it suddenly becomes clear, you're out of the, but we're gonna redefine that, because I think there are some conditions under which you can vote as an alternate member, but we need to
Yeah, we
clarify
don't have a
that.
quorum, but we do for.
Yeah. Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
John?
I,
And I'm an aye, so the motion passes.
Alan recuses himself.
Yes.
Okay. So that is 5. And 1 is a recuse. Okay.
That's it. Any other business?
So much, but it's not coming to mind.
You wanted my address? You mentioned
Oh,
my
yeah, I'll
address?
get that when we close the hearing out, because I got
All
it.
right, we have a motion to adjourn then?
I'll move to
So,
adjourn.
hang on one second. I got one thing I want to throw on the table, please.
Yes, Mark?
Can we get on the docket to have a conversation about the open space that's available down at the community gardens, the meadow? Perhaps there's an opportunity to do something there for someone in town. And I'd like to get that back on the table so we can have a discussion about it.
Yep, I know there's some people who might be interested in that. It's about 3 acres up there.
I'm not familiar, is that outside of the community gardens, or is it?
When you drive, it's the north, if you drive into the community gardens, there's a field on the north side.
Yeah,
That's ours.
okay,
And it's part of the 6-acre piece. 3 acres are gardens, 3 acres are field.
okay,
And in the past, several years ago, it was grazed for sheep. It could potentially be grazed or used for other agriculture. The property was purchased for the purpose of conservation and agriculture. So we don't have to worry about that. It's just the town, since, I don't know, that was before my time, I don't know why that didn't continue with the sheep or whatever, but it potentially, and we don't need it to, we don't need to expand the community gardens up there. We're pretty much able to accommodate everybody who wants to be there, one way or another. So if we wanted to do something agriculturally with that field, we could entertain that.
okay, all right, good.
I'll look at what the next agenda looks like. I'll put it on that one or the next one. We should talk about, so at the next meeting, we're gonna be talking about the bylaws. We have to get on, and we'll have a public meeting for that. I will put it, normally as a discussion item, we only put that on the agendas, but we'll put that in the paper and the legal ad too, that we're
Okay.
gonna have a public hearing on that.
Good.
We'll try to advertise it a little bit more, so get a little bit more public input, because I know the selectmen want more public input Could say we tried. But then after that, we need to, it's gonna be on the town meeting warrant, but it would be really nice to get to them end of January, early February, to make another formal presentation to them.
Yeah,
Okay?
all right. I didn't, well, I shouldn't say I didn't, because I did get a sense when we presented to the selectmen the last time that they were interested in how many public meetings we've had on this, strictly for the purpose of soliciting comments from the public on the changes that we're proposing. And that they were, I mean, we told them that we've had probably 3 or 4 open sessions where we invited members of the public to comment on our proposals. We finalized them now. They're in their, I think, pretty much final form as far as language is concerned. So I would think we might want to have one, at least, if not perhaps 2 opportunities for the public to comment on the final version of these.
Yep,
before
of course.
May comes around.
Yep. It'd be nice to get a recommendation from the selectmen,
Yes,
because right now they voted to put it on, but they didn't make a recommendation yet.
Right.
So.
okay, good. Is that covered, Amy?
I think so. We're gonna have, the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions is gonna have their annual conference this year. Right now, it's still proposed to be hybrid. It's always the first Saturday of March. It's up at the College of the Holy Cross. It is really great to go to. If you either want to attend in person or virtually, I think I'm not sure if the sign-up's out yet. I think they're still not sure if they're doing like the hybrid thing or if they're gonna do all virtual again with the rise in COVID. There's a lot of people who go to these things, so.
Okay.
But if anybody's interested, we pay for you to go. Either virtually or in person, we would pay for you.
Okay.
And there's all the, you could get a couple of your fundamentals courses, because there's a Fundamentals for Conservation Commission unit of 8. And if you haven't done them, or some of them, or you can get a couple of them done in a day. And there's also some really cool other workshops from, basically throughout New England. So I'll send along that information, but the way things are going with COVID, probably gonna be virtual.
Okay. All right. With that, let me make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.